This video is sponsored by Tales and Dragons' New Journey. More on them later. Well, I guess it had to get to this point eventually. Somewhere around the time when I was ranking every conceivable part of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, a lot of you said that I should try and rank all 152 shrines, which is, I mean, it's a lot, you know? It's a bigger number than I would be happy counting down from in one sitting, so I did have to take my time with large parts of this video, and especially the actual ranking side of things. My strategy for this will become more apparent as we move along, but effectively I familiarized myself with every shrine in Tears of the Kingdom, gave them an invisible tier, which just means that I assign them a tier from S to F to help split them up, but now the tiers aren't important and won't be a part of this video. I then used an ELO ranker to order the shrines within their respective tiers, and then reviewed my list at the end to make sure I was happy with it. The only other detail you need to know is that I'll be referring to the shrines by their title rather than name because A, I feel like most people will recognize the title more than the name, and B, some of these names are honestly ridiculous and I don't fancy pronouncing them. I'm explaining all of this now so you don't just think I rolled the dice and put shrines wherever, because 152 is a massive number, guys. I needed a plan to tackle this. And it's been enough of an undertaking that it would have stressed me out on any other week, but luckily, this video is sponsored by Tales and Dragons' New Journey, a free, deeply immersive RPG that gives you a fantastical world of dragons and magic to explore. It comes with a really helpful idling system that removes any of the grinding that other RPGs struggle with, so you can instead focus on planning out your team and unleashing your incredible strategies. I love the almost sinister aesthetic in Tales and Dragons' New Journey that encompasses characters from fairy tales in a familiar yet twisted way. Like my guy Quasi-Mortal here. Nice shovel, bro. And if you end up with an underwhelming character, don't worry, because you can always upgrade them and transform them into something awesome. And wow, if it isn't fun taking down all of these dragons with characters that are rocking some amazing designs. Now's a good time to download Tales and Dragons' New Journey, which you can easily do thanks to this QR code right here, or by clicking the download link in the description. Since not only do you get 1001 free draws upon logging in, which gives you a great chance at collecting rare heroes, but you can also redeem my creator code TNDLUCK for a first come first served offer of special in-game items that are worth up to $30. What are you waiting for? Download Tales and Dragons' New Journey today and help support my channel. Venture into the fantasy today with Tales and Dragons' New Journey. So let's get this going, and the first point of contention is what to do with all of the Rauru's Blessing Shrines. They had something like this in Breath of the Wild, and the idea is that most shrine quests have you complete some task in the overworld that eventually leads you to a shrine that consists of one small room with a chest that is meant more to reward your previous efforts than offer up another puzzle or challenge. Including these in the rankings would get hilariously complicated since they all have different quests to them, and some of them don't really have quests, and other shrine quests lead to actual puzzle shrines. So to save myself an unbelievable headache, all of the Rauru's Blessing Shrines are ranked at the bottom of the 152. I don't hate these, and often I'm happy to see them for some quick rewards, but since we're ranking how good or bad the actual shrine is, the same room copied and pasted 51 times, fuck yeah, I counted them, in Tears of the Kingdom is not great, and therefore I'm quite happy to assign ranks 151 through 102 to all of the Rauru's Blessing Shrines. Like I said, I don't think they're terrible, and in the grand scheme of Tears of the Kingdom, a rest is very welcome, but we're comparing them to actual puzzles and effort, so yeah. Holy shit, we're a third of the way through already. This is going to be a piece of cake. For the second and last time, we're going to knock out a group of shrines in one go. Don't worry, after this we'll be going one at a time for just under 100 shrines. Don't think that I'm shortchanging you here. A lot of shrines in Tears of the Kingdom are good because they function as tutorials for game mechanics without being too obvious about it. The natural exceptions are the combat training shrines, which are fairly redundant given that this game teaches you how to fight perfectly adequately without needing shrines, but also, you're not guaranteed to find these shrines at the start of the game when you'll theoretically need them the most. Like, what was the Great Sky Island for if not to teach me how to fight enemies and survive? So, going quickly because we've got more interesting shrines to rank, I've got two archery tutorials at 101 and 100, with Tornhi marginally ahead of Makarukis since it teaches you about shooting arrows in bullet time. You can see why I'm not using shrine names. Then I've got the shield tutorial at 99, which teaches you about shield parries with different elements. 98 is the standard combat training for learning how to flurry rush. 97 is the throwing tutorial for weapons, which is nice. 96 is the throwing tutorial for materials, which is a tad bit more useful because you'll be doing more of that in this game. And finally, 95 is the sneak strike training because that's actually kind of helpful and it's good to practice. Everyone's still with me so far, but you're keeping up, but you're doing good. We're gonna go one after another now. It's gonna be long and fun and oh yeah. Anyway, on to actually exciting things, and I'm sure you're interested in finding out what the worst conventional shrine is in Tears of the Kingdom. And for my money, which admittedly isn't worth all that much anymore, no shrine had me slamming my head into the desk as hard as alignment of circles. It's not fun, there's basically no challenge apart from noticing some stupid aesthetic design on the ceiling, and then you move some balls around. Shrines can be so much better than this. Courage to Fall, unfortunately, is only a tiny bit better than this, and the way in which it fucks with my inbuilt sense to stay away from lasers is very counterintuitive. I'm not showing courage to fall, I'm showing courage to touch lasers. That's not a thing! Drifting flame pissed me off so much. You need to press a switch to extend the wicks on these flames so that you can light them, and it just becomes this super awkward back and forth with recoil and the floor lowers, which is distracting enough to not notice the pillars extend down. It's just a pain. Building blocks is a glorified Korok puzzle, and I have no idea why they made this into a full shrine. Doesn't take much more effort than the same puzzle in the overworld. What happened here? A general rule of thumb moving forward is that the Proving Ground shrines are amazing, and we'll be seeing a lot more of them later in the video, so you have to know how ungodly frustrating Lights Out was for me. It's pitch black apart from some light stuck to a shield, and it runs counter to what Proving Ground shrines are all about. You're forced to use this one type of shield or fight in the dark against enemies that can see you. It's so annoying. And straight after that, we have another bad Proving Grounds, the Infiltration one that promotes being stealthy, which is great in theory, but doesn't gel well with how sensitive the enemy AI is to movement and how the theme of this shrine is finished the second that you're seen. There's no way to reset without leaving the shrine. Metal Gear, this is not. Fire and Ice could have been cool if it wasn't for the fire jets obstructing the pressure plate that needs pushing down to reach the end, so I actually spent about 20 minutes trying to work out what I needed to do here. Man, did I melt a lot of ice though! Missing Pathways is a nothing shrine that you can blow through inside a minute. The pathways are technically missing, but it's painfully obvious what you need to do, and then it's just mindlessly ascending until you reach the end. Shining in Darkness is like a slower, less hostile version of Lights Out. Just a big dark maze that hides a few secrets and puzzles and even a few hazards, but it's a slow plod through the same looking corridors. It needs some more enemies, please. Jailbreak has an amazing name that falls so short of its potential by being a run-of-the-mill Ascend shrine right until the end when it looks like you're stuck in this cage, but then your solution is right outside and you'll see it immediately. Cool idea, I guess. I don't like the hot air balloon in Tears of the Kingdom, and an uplifting device puts it front and center. Everything's slow and tedious, and yet I always end up with my balloons drifting out of my Ultra Hand range, so nah, I'm good, man. I was able to figure out a retraced path in about 5 seconds of entering the shrine. You recall this big ball and hit this switch so that the ball recalls into the hole that you've now moved behind it. Clever, but a little bit insulting when this is the full extent of the entire shrine. At least a balanced plan is a longer shrine, but not exactly any more fun. You're balancing these scales so that you can climb up them with Link's body weight, and it never gets more interesting than that. Especially if you fancy cheesing through it with recall. Force transfer tied me in knots, and not in a good way. I like the moving gears and how you need to attach objects to them to transfer the force through the shrine, but it's too finicky to not run into problems, and everything just kept breaking when I did it, so I'd rather eat a watermelon. A prone pathway is too much shrine for my blood. The rotating cage in the middle reminds me a lot of the motion control shrines in Breath of the Wild, and it says a lot that I wished this was motion controlled. I feel like I had no control over where the cage was going, and the novelty wore off way too fast. Moving the spheres is kind of interesting, but it falls flat quite quickly. You sure do move those spheres, and sometimes there isn't even any flat ground to move them onto, but most of the time there is, so it doesn't slow you down for long. I feel like Built for Rails is one of the most divisive shrines in the whole game. Some people love how you can use a bunch of different ideas to surf these rails, and others hate how confusing the final stage is. I hate this one because I went through the first 2 stages by shield surfing, and the last stage doesn't let you do this, so I had to engage all of my brain at once. Yes, it hurt a lot. You spend more time moving things around in Wind Power than you do actually thinking of the solution. You turn a wheel that moves fans around that powers other fans, and I shouldn't be able to describe the one puzzle of a shrine in one short sentence. I like that a precise strike lets you create your own mallet for whacking balls into holes, but I hate that it doesn't go much further than this. Technically it's one hole to complete the shrine and another moving hole for an extra treasure chest, but that's still not great. Aid from above is one okay puzzle surrounded by a lot of filler and a laser grid. The puzzle where you need to keep the laser triggered is fun, but the solution to the laser grid is kinda spoiled by the shrine name, and I was on the lookout for things being above me from the start of this shrine. Mallet Smash is like a cooler version of a precise strike, except you don't have to be precise, and can instead use rockets to launch logs into buttons. If the solutions were more interesting or a little less obvious, this would have been a lot higher. I died so much on Proving Grounds Flow that I initially had this much lower down on the ranking. The constructs have shock projectiles which can fuck you up real hard with all this water around, but then I found out that you can ultra hand these wooden towers, and that made my life a whole lot more fun for some reason. Buried Light is a quick showcase of how fans can blow away piles of sand, and at least the shrine itself is several rooms big and builds to some kind of interesting final puzzle. I can only blow away piles of sand for so long until I want to end it though. Can you guess what you need to do in stacking a path? The one not brain dead thing you do is bring a previous box stack with you as you go through the shrine, but you're just making a big ladder and there's nothing more to it than that. Building with logs is a strange idea for a shrine given that you likely built a lot of things with logs when messing around on the Great Sky Island. It's got a few neat ideas, but the end is just making a raft to cross a body of water. My guy, I've done a lot of that already. Wings on the Wind acts like a simple tutorial on how the Wing Zonai device can move things through the air, and that's fine, but did it have to be so bare bones? Just the two small puzzles, one with fans attached and one without, and that's all the wings you get to play with for now. The Power of Water is a clever shrine that still gave me a big headache. You're trying to power up this battery so that you can ride this platform, and you have to get some brain cells out so that you can work out that this needs to be a water wheel and I can transfer electricity across water, and yeah, this is high concept but not amazing with the execution. Scoop It Out is a bit of a flex of the physics engine that actually sees you create a scoopy wheel, whatever these are called, and you're trying to get one of the dozens of balls up to the platform above. It's hard to judge because there's a lot of randomness happening here, and you can just as easily attach one ball to the wheel itself, so it kinda works. An upright device asks the question, what the fuck is a stabilizer? They're not a common Zonai device in the overworld, so this will most likely be your first exposure to one, and while confusing at first, you do eventually begin to comprehend how they work. And when you do, you can make fucking catapults with them. Ride the Winds is cool, but painfully short. I really like the idea of a shrine where wind blows you along quite quickly and you've got things to dodge, but after the lasers and a bit of skydiving, that's basically it, except for the room with the constructs. If this was twice as long and interesting, I'd be a lot more impressed. Whereas building bridges is just kind of average all the way through. The jiggle bones of the bridges are fun to mess around with and it can be satisfying to ascend through your creations, but once you've made your first bridge, there's not much else to surprise you. It's just a little bland, you know? A windy device is your de facto fan tutorial and therefore it's hard to judge. Definitely helpful to have, but the puzzles are a tad obvious if you spent more than 2 minutes messing around with a fan. The coolest thing you do with it is completely optional and I think I'm okay with that. I would have probably loved gravity and velocity if it wasn't for the last little bit. Gravity that you can turn on and off is a treat for puzzles, and it's very entertaining seeing how it affects this giant ball, but I don't know. I really struggled with getting the ball in this stupid box. Maybe that's just on me. A well-timed bounce reminds me a lot of a retraced path in that I could tell what I needed to do within seconds of entering the shrine, but here the actual solution is harder to pull off because, you know, you need to time it well. Plus, using recall isn't super obvious, so it made me feel a little bit smarter than usual. Mid-air perch is your hoverstone tutorial, which is wonderful because the hoverstone is amazing, but I feel like this isn't the best shrine for showing off what it can do. At the very least, the last section has about 4 different solutions depending on how your brain works, and I like that kind of creative freedom. Orbs of Water is your water orb tutorial. Wow, lots of tutorials all of a sudden. Which I enjoy because it comes at a point where this knowledge is valuable for using the orbs in the overworld. It's a pretty cool shrine that uses Ultra Hand and Recall in some creative ways, but it's like a really slow navigation shrine. You're getting to the end, just slowly. Jump the Gaps is bare bones, but what is there is pretty damn cool. You're making ramps to get these balls in some holes, and even though it's not very complex or challenging, it's satisfying to see my homemade ramp do its job perfectly. Needed another hole, if I'm being honest though. I'm not going to say that Hidden Metal is a rehash or anything, but it does feel like the sort of shrine that could have been in Breath of the Wild. You're transferring electricity through these metal balls where the solution is fairly obvious, but damn if I wasn't happy with myself when I accidentally solved the second part with the ball swings back. I'm an inadvertent genius. You can see downward force like the Rito equivalent of orbs of water and as the tutorial shrine for the airships with the bouncy sails. Similarly situational and a little less technically complex, so you quickly run out of unique puzzles, but shooting the arrow through the bars is the perfect way to end the shrine. Not sure why so many people were confused about what to do here. A flying device is like a slightly more interesting wing tutorial, but at least it builds in the right direction. You're trying to make some kind of device that will get you over this chasm, so you need a wing, a cart, and a fan, and the shrine is basically just finding a way of grabbing all of these and getting them over to the runway. Simple, but effective. Given my very public display of affection for the steering stick, you'd think that a controlling device would be way up there, but this is a very gentle tutorial for the steering stick. The puzzles are simple, the terrains you need to overcome aren't too complex, and even the corners you need to steer around are a little too easy. If this was a little straighter, you could ditch the steering stick entirely. Despite how simple the concept is, I really enjoyed shape rotation. I can't speak to its intelligent design or anything because it's for Shape Cube from the dentist, just in Zelda now, but I like that the engine lets this be a puzzle, you know? Nice tutorial on why rotating stuff with Ultra Hand is important. Swing to Hit had me stumped for a while, but once it clicked with me, it clicked hard. The shrine name had me thinking that I need to hit something, but actually you're just attaching big cubes to launch these blocks forward, and if I understood this sooner, it'd probably be a little bit higher. Maybe it needs a better name? The ice guides you is a nifty idea that needed more experimentation. You can create this sheet of ice and then slide down to hit this switch, which reminded me a lot of the Bomb Chew gallery in Ocarina of Time for some reason. You do this once to finish the shrine, which isn't great, but there's an optional second puzzle if you fancy it. I'd like more than that, please. Outside of shrines, the hydrant is underwhelming, but sometimes it finds its niche in shrines, like in Water Makes a Way, where you use it on some lava so that you can make platforms to help you cross. You even make a bridge to reach a chest. It's very nice work. Maybe it's because they both use the hydrant on lava, but I swear Against the Flow is exactly the same shrine as Water Makes a Way. Functionally, they're not far off, and I'm only putting this one above the previous because you can make an airboat out of cooled lava, and that's a fun idea. Never mind built for rails, a fixed device is the most divisive shrine in the game that I personally don't fall on the hating side of, since that rotating platform keyed me in pretty quickly that stakes can be attached to things, and after that, you're just playing baseball and there's nothing wrong with that. Any shrines with rotating gears will have a pretty obvious solution, but I always remember spinning gears for being the shrine that glitched the fuck out while I was live streaming. Love from India? Holy cow. Whoa. Whoa. I'm so sorry, excuse me. Other than that, it's alright. The crank is a nice touch. Rise and Fall is a vague name for a more elaborate than usual recall shrine. It only really has 3 short sections to it, but the last one feels like one of the few parts of Tears of the Kingdom where Nintendo want you to use the recall Ultra Hand trick. Little did they know that you can use it everywhere. Turbine power is what wind power should have been. Same basic idea of needing to activate something by attaching a Zonai device to a spinny thing, but turbine power has a lot more steps to it and has you work a little harder to solve the puzzle. Plus there's fire involved, and that just looks really cool when it spins around. A spinning device makes surprisingly inventive use of the small wheels to do a lot more than just move a vehicle forward. Most of it is pretty basic, but keeping the crank moving by putting a wheel next to it is kinda clever, as is the way in which you move this last platform. I almost wish there were more vehicles though, because these wheels are fast. We could have done something with that. A reflective device has the kind of mirror puzzles that instantly remind me of classic Zeldas of old. They're mostly simple showcases of how the mirror works, which never get too elaborate, but when your highlights include holding a mirror through bars to open the door in front of you, and creating a chain of light beams, you better believe I'll pay attention. Upward and Forward is all about building some pretty awesome looking bridges. It's got a bit more left field thinking than some other shrines, and this rotating platform put a smile on my face. But the main event is this small slab that you make into a longer slab so that it can catapult you to the end. Lovely work. Included in amongst the vast, incredibly large list of shrines are the 4 ability tutorials, which are significantly different to the combat tutorials because you have to do this at the start of the game. So I have to judge them based on your experience at the time. I reckon the Ascend tutorial is the worst of the 4, ability to rise, if just because Ascend is a pretty basic ability and they can't do anything too crazy during the tutorial. Still though, ascending through the bridge is kind of advanced. Given all that it can do for you, the Recall tutorial, ability to rewind, could have done more. I appreciate that it's a wild ability that maybe needs a gentler approach, but I've seen what future Recall shrines are like, and this is a tad underwhelming. However, since Recall is such a baller ability, even the tutorial blew my mind a little, and that's quite helpful. Flotational Brilliance is a hilarious name for a shrine, and it makes use of the criminally underused, big floaty ball. For real though, the floaty ball is used here for some creative puzzles, and it makes me a little mad that so few shrines brought it out to play with. It can make a heavy slab into a boat, what's not to love? Bridging the sands was a cool idea for a shrine that I mostly don't remember, since the second half of it I ended up skipping because of the now famous Recall exploit on the ball. Is it an exploit? I don't know, but navigating sand currents is surprisingly okay, so fantastic. Fire and Ice was bullshit, but Fire and Water was a pretty groovy shrine. You got a lot of blocks made out of different materials that you need to juggle through a variety of hazards so that you can make this tall structure that you can ascend through. It's a little bit of a heavy thinker, and I definitely melted even more ice, but at least it was semi-useful this time. Speaking of making ascend pathways, the Way Up is a shrine all about this idea. It starts with this simple platform, but by the end you're making these elaborate steps, and it's a fun test of your spatial construction abilities. Not very complicated, but sometimes shrines don't need to be. You want to talk simple? Lever Power is literally just a shrine where you build a longer and longer lever so that you can hit things that are further away. The solution is clear as day, but does it make it any less awesome that you can launch yourself through the air because of your own creations? Absolutely not. Backtrack is often a dirty word when it comes to game design, but it makes for a pretty sick shrine. Sometimes all you need is the right kind of recall puzzles, and when I figured out that I could race my recall on this ball so that it goes from one hole to another, yeah, okay, maybe backtracking ain't too bad after all. Fuse is an ability that doesn't have much focus in shrines, and so ability to combine is one of the few instances where it's put front and center. In a way, it's a showcase of why Fuse isn't usually the focus, and the puzzles are very basic versions of what you'll be doing a lot of in the overworld. But as a tutorial for showing that you can make weapons that have different properties, it does a fine job of that. A bouncy device sounds like it would be using the big floaty ball in water, but actually, it's an entertaining shrine all about the spring device, which highlights how you can launch Link forward at different angles, and launch objects, and even stack springs on top of each other to get some mad air. I like shrines of verticality. The original bog standard Proving Grounds may seem a tad simplistic when compared to its variants, but it is introducing one of the coolest types of shrine in the game. The beginning part alludes more to the abundance of resources and general lack of constructs or challenge, but you gotta start somewhere, and this is a good place to do so. We'll start to see more shrines that have rockets in them hopefully, and a launching device is an encouraging start. Strapping propulsion to carts is a laugh riot, especially when it doesn't go very well, but I appreciate the progression of challenge from a rocket-powered cart on rails, and then a jump across a gap, and even a vertical boost for a chest. Feels like we're getting somewhere. Proving Grounds rotation is a proving ground that has massive gears that act as the floor, and I'm not 100% sure this is a good thing. It doesn't change much of how you fight the constructs, but it does make navigation a bit more interesting, especially with these sideways gears. The giant rotating fire thing in the middle is a nice touch. Built to Carry is my kind of shrine concept. Big ball that wants to travel the world, but the rails that lead further into the shrine aren't good enough to support the ball on its own, so you need to get creative with your magic hand. It's not too difficult until the last part where some lateral thinking is helpful, but it will definitely help you feel smart. That's the reason why we're here, right? Ability to Create is the best official tutorial in Tears of the Kingdom, and that shouldn't be too surprising, given how unbelievable Ultra Hand is as an ability, and how by showing the tiniest fraction of what it can do, this shrine is still capable of blowing my mind. It's also the first shrine in the game, so expectations are naturally lower, but still, damn. Someone really wanted Magnesis to do more for them, didn't they? The intermediate version of Proving Grounds is about as challenging as you can expect the slightly harder version to look like. The most notable change is probably this big tower, so you have to fight constructs at different heights, but it's not too bad and actually encourages you to be a little stealthier. Still feels like they're easing you into Proving Grounds as a concept, but we're getting there. More Than Defense is a shrine where Fuse absolutely sings. Not directly, since you're mostly just inheriting fancy shields from constructs and then you're using their secondary effects to progress, but this shrine aims to demonstrate how shields have other uses, and it's a knockout in that regard. Told you we'd see more rockets. Timely Catches has to be one of the tallest shrines in the game. It's all about activating switches so that these balls can land on buttons, which is easy enough for the first puzzle, but the second takes place in this massive room where you have to race the ball down to activate the switch. It's not too difficult, but you know how I like tall shrines. And predictably, a tall Proving Grounds is also a lot of fun. Ascension relies a little less on Ascend than its name implies, since there's also a hot air balloon and rockets if you fancy them, but it's amazing just how much space you have in this shrine. You can engage with constructs one at a time and you're never in danger of being boxed in. Plenty of opportunities to take the high ground. Nintendo realized that the floaty ball shrines were too powerful, and so Deep Force had to have a vague name so that people wouldn't get too excited. It's a shrine all about using the floaty ball and this new floaty platform's buoyancy underwater to solve puzzles and hit switches, and it's probably more fun than it looks. Gonna need a whole game like this now, thanks. Proving Grounds Smash turns you into a demolition expert, but with a lack of explosives, you must instead turn towards big iron balls to get the work done. I wish you could destroy more things that would matter, but what is here is wonderful. That center pillar and the constructs who stood on it never stood a chance. Long or wide reminds me a lot of something like Mallet Strike, but the difference here is that you're actually changing the paddles to make them more effective, like how you need this big block for extra power, or how this paddle needs to be longer. And how else are you going to hit this cart forward? My noodle feels worked. Well-timed cuts test your spatial awareness for not letting chests fall down into the endless void, and this is only necessary because one of these chests contains a key. Your cuts only have to be well-timed at the end where this ball needs to roll into this hole, but by this time, you will be very well versed in how to cut a rope with arrows. It's an important skill. The Stakes Gaiju might be a tutorial shrine, but it's here to teach you how one of the most versatile devices can be used in ingenious ways. A fixed device taught me about stakes being used for platforming, but here you can stick them on moving platforms and ascend through them. Also, you can stick them in a wall to stop objects and encourage the ball to go in the hole. It's really creative and honestly a little eye-opening. The right roll had the potential to be a problem, but only if the last part messes with your brain too much. It's got a similar vibe as Built to Carry in that these balls need to smack into these switches ASAP, but instead of sliding down rails, these balls here are freely rolling down increasingly precarious ramps. The bendy one at the end is daunting as hell, but wow does it feel good when you get it right. Alignment is a classic example of simplicity sometimes being the order of the day. It's not hard to work out what you need to do, but the combination of recall and ascend works so well here, and it feels awesome having full control of enacting the obvious solution. Plus, rewinding such a big object is just a cool time all around. A route for a ball is a super simple shrine that is made more complicated by a bunch of nifty ideas. Ball needs to go in hole, you know how this works by now, but the route back to the hole has you using this massive ball in smart ways to help ferry a smaller ball through a series of tricky obstacles. It's so clever and yet a very natural method of thinking. Sticking the balls together to ride the rails, wow, gorgeous! Sleds are fun, and clearly a shrine designed for sleds is some of the most fun you can have in this game. A sliding device gives you more than your money's worth with the sled, starting with some fancy recalling up the sand, before you're given just loads of sand to explore with your airboat. Bit less cheese heavy than the other sand sled shrines, so you can really lean into how fun it is to use the sled like this. Next time, exactly like this, but make it icy. The main strategy with Proving Grounds is to pick up weapons and try not to die, but lure changes everything. You could fight it normally, but you'll be missing a trick since you can kite the constructs through these lasers, which are hazardous, as they should be, and they'll trigger traps and help you take them down. It doesn't do a ton of damage to the constructs, but it's a handy boost to your DPS that feels fun to pull off, so no complaints here. Low gravity is fun whenever it turns up in a shrine, and even more so when it turns up in a Proving Grounds. The big improvement here is how Link moves around the shrine, and clearly this was intended since the playable space is massive and you've got bomb barrels and rockets to take advantage of it. It's like a floaty playground full of robots, and a laser spear. Anyone sick of Proving Grounds yet? I hope not, because Short Circuit is exactly the switch up that these shrine concept needs sometimes. Yes, there's an abundance of shock weaponry here, so you need to be careful that the constructs don't use it against you, but a lot of the constructs are deliberately placed on metal platforms, and you don't have to be a genius to figure out what happens next. Look at them dance! I don't know how many of you will agree with this, but I had to put Courage to Pluck in the top 10, because few shrines put a bigger grin on my face than the first time I saw this. Clearly Zelda was always meant to let you play Jenga. Why does this feel like a fan-made creation, and why does this make it better somehow? The reprieve from Proving Grounds was brief because we're back with In Reverse. It's hardly subtle what the gimmick is here, but Recall soon presents itself as the most entertaining path to win, since these constructs are throwing bombs at you that can be returned to sender, and that feels really nice. It takes a lot to be a better Proving Grounds than the Recall one, but Traps became one of my favourites when I worked out how to play it properly. Every Proving Grounds can be played without using the central gimmick, but if you actually set traps for constructs, it feels awesome in a way that is somehow even better than the lore version. You can actually do prep work to make life easier for yourself, and having your plans come off is just the best feeling around. You should never give Link prep time. Any shrine where you make a vehicle is usually fun, so combining it with a Proving Grounds is almost like cheating. You got so much open space to work with, as well as a ton of different options for Zonai weaponry, and it's all in service of causing maximum chaos. They couldn't possibly have been prepared for any of this. I think Forward or Backward is my favourite Recall shrine. It's nothing too insane, but it's about half a dozen really satisfying, often very creative puzzles that crucially don't repeat their solutions. You're not working through more and more complicated versions of the same thing, you're exploring all of the wonderful things that Recall can do for you. Which is how it should be, really. Given my background, I want to spend a little more time talking about the top 5, and after all that we've talked about, it's worth remembering that Raoru's Blessing Shrines do start to suck after your 30-second visit, but at least they set up Unlit Blessing flawlessly. If you switched off like I did when you saw the shrine setting, you probably didn't notice the name being different, but if that was the case, you likely woke up when the layout of the shrine dramatically morphs into this madness, with an extra archery puzzle to sweeten the deal. Yes, it's still easy and simple, but my word did it get a reaction out of me. Consider my expectations subverted. Wheeled Wonders aims to demonstrate how amazing vehicles can be when they're not just being used for navigation. It actually feels like a greatest hit showcase for other puzzles, but now there's a Zonai vehicle involved, and making a bridge by using a car is so fucking clever. It doesn't, or shouldn't, take a genius to work out that the last puzzle needs you to get all these balls on this switch, but you're given the materials to make a plow, and this is just superb. Link would make a fantastic manual labourer. Forward Force is a spectacular vehicle shrine, and even more so given that you're never given a steering stick. That's the challenge here. You have to escort this big ball through a series of awkward terrains, and it really tests how well you know the physics engine and how talented you are at building with Ultra Hand. The lava is straightforward, but then there's this elevated platform, and it is so satisfying working out how to propel the ball up here. The raft at the end can be a little janky, but if anything, it kind of adds to the charm. It can be imperfect and still do the job. The best Proving Grounds is arguably the least involved and almost definitely the least true to the concept of Proving Grounds, but I can't get past how fun the hunt is. This is the shrine that keyed me in on how stupidly entertaining the right combination of Zonai devices can be, and deploying your little battle bots to even the playing field makes this feel like where Proving Grounds were always leading. You don't really focus on the on-site procurement of weapons, you can just kick back and let them do all the work. I have friends now, and they are merciless. Of course, Courage to Jump is number 1, because not only is this one of the few shrines in the game to have anti-grav active, so you've got floatier jumps, it's got a 4-wheeled vehicle with a steering stick and a shrine called Courage to Jump. So you just gotta know that you're gonna be getting some sick air in here somewhere. A lot of people have compared this to Mario Kart, and while there isn't a lot of racing per se, it is an obstacle course designed for a Zonai-powered vehicle, and it is pretty much the only instance in all of Tears of the Kingdom where something like this exists. And to top it all off, there's that jump at the end. I feel so courageous right now. Holy crap, I think we're done. Did you enjoy it? Do you agree? Is there a different shrine that you'd have at number 58? Let me know in a comment down below, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and hit subscribe for more, and demolish that bell for notifications of every new upload. If you somehow need more entertainment, I talked about the hardest Soulsborne boss fights last week, and I also want to thank my top supporters on Patreon, including Sarah Mallion, Christopher Robinson, and the Green Scorpion. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.